Hello, my name is Maurice Washington. I want to welcome everybody to another episode of Executive Talk, those that are watching live and also those that are watching on social media. I want to make sure, speaking of social media, that you guys have an opportunity to connect with us. Connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and also on YouTube. Now, not just throwing a plug out there for these social media platforms, it's a way for us to engage in this conversation. We want to make sure that you know that this is a community-based show. It's not only for business owners, it's not only for employees, it's for you as a person. And that's what we do here at Executive Talk. We talk about the heart and soul of your business. So again, on Facebook and also on YouTube is where we do a lot of communication. This is where you can ask questions. This is where you can offer a suggestion. This is where we can start the engagement, because there's people out here that want to see what you have to say as well regarding the topic, because something's going to hit you in your heart. And speaking of heart, prepare your heart. Now, what does prepare your heart really mean? That means when you hear some of this topic, it may hit you personally. It's very easy to offset this and give it to somebody else and say, they need to hear this, or my friend should hear this, or this business owner I know, or this employee that I know. What about you? This is for you because you're the watcher, you're the viewer. So we need you to engage and open up your heart, because if it hits you in a certain way and you leave a comment, it's going to affect somebody else in a positively or negatively way. But nonetheless, we are going to open up the dialogue to help stretch it and reach and make sure the community at large is being served emotionally. Just to reiterate our topic, we are in part 3 of our series. Okay, so I encourage you to look back at the past 2 series to get up to speed on what we're talking about, but I'll try to make a couple of references so you understand where we're going. But are your habits toxic to your business growth? I want you to sit on that real quick. Are your habits toxic to your business growth? You see how habits and toxic are next to each other? That's what we're discussing. We're discussing these habits. We all have personal habits, and just to reiterate in our first show, we talked about you have habits that you have from your childhood. You have habits like your father, you have habits like your mother, and you have some of your ones that you created yourself. But in the workplace, these are where our habits are showing up. We can't just take our habits and shove them up underneath the couch and think we've left them at the house. No, they came to work with us. How is it showing up in your business environment? How is it showing up in the environment that you promised to serve as an employee? Are you that employee, the disruptor of the office? Or are you that productive employee? Well, let's go ahead and get into this conversation. So on part 3, we have Genesis 1:28. Now there's a particular reason why I'm bringing up Genesis 1:28, and let's go ahead and read it. So God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it. Okay? So, let's go ahead and go over that one more time. God blessed them, and that's Adam and Eve, both male and female, right? And said to them, be fruitful. The way that we look at be fruitful, well, we look at it as maybe, or have kids, right? So that's what we kind of consider be fruitful. And multiply, okay, there's another way we think about it from a kid's perspective. And fill the earth and subdue it. Now, I want you to think about this word, subdue it. If you look up the definition of subdue it, or subdue, it's to overcome, it's to quieten, or bring under control. Overcome, quieten, or bring under control. It's funny, I was just having a conversation about quieten. It is actually a word. So just roll with me on this. But you can look it up online and check it out. But it's to bring under control. So then God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful, multiply, and fill the earth, and overcome, quieten, or bring under control. You have this major ability that comes with you. Sometimes you're trying to figure out how you do certain things. You have this thing called subdue. Okay, so you are built to subdue an environment. So no matter what environment that you're in, you're going to bring this level of energy to the table of subduing. So if I have habits and they're bad, let's say they're fleshly habits, because we're getting away from that whole bad habit thing. But they're fleshly habits, And the enemy understands this scripture. But because we're not in the scripture and we're not walking biblically, the enemy understands that you still are capable of doing that. Whatever God bless you with, that means you're still capable of doing with it. It's just going to end up with bad results. That's where that statement comes from, life is so hard. Because we have come into this place where the enemy will take, and again, God's words, because he believes it. We don't. So that's how he can manipulate our lives. Still taking God's word. So you're still built to subdue it. But you still have some habits that you have an ability, not even a habit, you have an ability to bring stuff under control. The enemy loves that because you don't know it. In Hosea, it says, my people are destroyed because of the lack of knowledge. Because you don't understand what you're capable of, it brings destruction to you. And that's in part 2. So let's bring it back to a long time ago. Or maybe even currently for those that are seeking that interview process. Okay, so you're in the interview, you're sitting down, and you're having this conversation. Okay, you have the employer, and you have the employee right there. Let's say you're the employee, and I'm the employer. At this table, we're having an agenda conversation. Now, what does that mean? Well, my agenda as an employer, you know what I need? I need somebody to fill a particular position. I need the most qualified person. I need somebody who's going to help us bring in more revenue. I just need somebody that's my agenda. I have somebody that needs to fill a particular spot. Now you came to the table. Okay, you could have went on Indeed.com. That's a little plug for you guys. Not getting paid by Indeed.com. But Indeed.com, you saw my position. You applied for it. We had a conversation. So that's how you got to the interview. But what's your agenda? As a potential employee, your agenda is, guess what? I'm either A, at a job that I currently don't like. I'm currently at a job that, I'm trying to compare apples and oranges to see what move I want to make next because, I'm kind of in that cusp of getting bored. Or I'm not working right now, so I need to get employed so that way I can continue paying my bills and doing whatever the case may be. But I have a particular skill set that may fill the position that I need. So that's why this conversation has even came to the table. 2 empty holes with 2 different agendas, and we have this conversation. Now, in this conversation, we are getting somewhere. We are getting to the point where you're proving to me that you're the best candidate. I can stop my search as an employer, and you're proving to me as an employee that I can stop my search because you're the right person. So that's the mutual conversation that we're coming into play. But I want you to think about this. How does this scripture come into play? Proverbs 18:21. We've mentioned in other shows, and you guys have probably read this in the scriptures or heard it, but the tongue has the power of life and death, and those who love it will eat its fruit. Why is that right there, Maurice? Good question. At the interview, there is life and death at the conversation. I want you to think about that. There is life and death in this conversation. In our conversation, we had an agenda conversation. But the laws, the HR says you can't have a personality conversation, can you? You can't ask the person, hey, look, I don't know, are you crazy? I mean, please tell me now if you're crazy. You know how that is. You would love people to just give you their warning label so that way you can kind of ease the pain. Or what kind of crazy stuff do you bring to the table? You would love to have that conversation, but HR and the laws, and rightfully so, does not allow for that conversation to happen. So you have to keep it on the surface level. So there was a level of life in this conversation in the interview that happened, but there was a level of death because there was some real detail that was not able to be discussed. So what happened is you guys were able to enter into an agreement based on the agendas both parties wanted to meet. Again, I needed somebody to fill this position. You were an available candidate. You're looking for another position. So that's what the conversation meant. And that's how we came to this agreement. So we shook hands based on this level of conversation, but we didn't really shake hands knowing how the party reacts or who they really are as a person. Do you see the missing link? And that's what the enemy looks for. He looks for these little holes and crevices of what didn't take place. Because in those holes and crevices, he can enter into a room. That's how the enemy wants to operate. But you guys came to an agreement. You guys both love each other. It sounds like it's going to be a great fit. So here you guys are. Now, after the relationship phase of that 3 months, or I don't know, it can be one of those weird for 1 year. I just love my job. I love how this works. I'm in the best place ever as an employee. You guys get into that conversation as an employer. You know, this is the best employee I've ever had. And you spend all that attention and time with them. But one thing that's starting to happen is because you guys were able to do this in the very beginning, because everybody's best foot was forward in the very beginning of this agreement at this interview, then this is now once you guys are in each other's world, the higher on, so once the agreement, that means you guys have agreed, you guys have came to a deal in each other's world. But now, at this point, what do you guys default to? This relationship has now shifted already. It shifted day one. Now, what happens to people is you feel like nothing has ever changed. You feel like that conversation is, because that was the first thing that you're holding on to and nothing else more. So then you shifted, the other person has shifted to a different level of this relationship. So you guys were here. Now the relationship has already went here because an agreement has been made. I'm starting to change my expectations because now I started to trust this environment. But now the next level of this relationship is I'm starting to judge your habits. I'm starting to look at everything you do. I remember what you said. I remember what you said a month ago, a month into the relationship, and I see what you're saying 3 months. I'm looking to see if there's a line that's happening here. I'm looking at your habits. Same with the employer looking at the employee. The employee is looking at it, or the employer is looking at the employee every single day. You said that you're going to be on time. You said that you quit the other job because you were on time all the time and they just didn't value you. Okay, so I'm actually valuing you and I want to see how you react to that. I'm judging your habits because you had told me something. I tried to fill that gap of value for you, and I want to see how you react based on the fact that I'm providing value to you. The employees looking at the employer said, hey, look, you said you need somebody who's reliable. And I'm reliable, and I'm seeing how you're treating my reliability here. So I'm judging these habits based on this relationship now because of that first interview question. So what is my perception? What do you think it is at this stage? I bet some of you guys can think about it right now because that's where you guys, I can guarantee you, you're reading this like, wow, I know I had this conversation with my other boss. Okay, my previous boss, or the one that I currently am working for. I see exactly what you're talking about. That's what my issue is in this relationship. In our very beginning of the conversation, he or she had told me this, that, and the other, and here I am still trying to commit to that, and the thing has changed. And vice versa. The employer may be looking at you in that fashion. Well, I thought this employee was going to be here, be on time, and work hard, and all this stuff, but they're not doing anything. I am so frustrated. And so that brings up the question. That brings up this question of the habits. How well do you do? At what, Maurice? Okay, let's go ahead and bring it up. This wheel here has a couple of different action items that these are part of your habits as well. How well do you communicate? Now, communication is one of those weird things, and I guarantee it's coming up in one of our conversations. I just know it is here at Executive Talk. But how well do you communicate? Just because I spoke to you doesn't mean I communicated to you. Okay? Words can again have the perception of a movement, but if it's not going anywhere, if it's not really what you should be saying, it's not really communicating, it's not effective. But how well do you actually communicate? Timeliness. Now, you can be very prompt on timeliness, or you can be one of those people who kind of shows up 5, 10 minutes, and that imaginary grace period that you created for yourself so you don't feel bad. You know how it is. True to your word. How well do you feel like you're true to your word? Do you feel like you're extremely dependable? Oh, I have my days when I'm a little off or whatever, but you just claim that you're dependable. Consistent. How consistent are you? Yeah, I'm very consistent. I mean, I'm working Monday through Friday. I haven't taken any days off. I've always been there. I'm here. I'm consistent. Let me show you how this thing counteracts each other. Maintain your mood. Okay? It's very easy. I have some situations at home, so I bring them to the office every now. But other than that, yeah, people know what to expect from me. I'm just, Mr. Cool or Mr. or Mrs. Cool. All right. Well, let's take you back around this wheel and show you how this thing counteracts each other. So I'm true to my word. Let's say, because, everybody is funny. We're in this world where there's nobody that lies. We're just always the ones getting lied to. Have you noticed that? It's one of the bad habits of this world, the fleshly habits. We're always the victim of everything. All right? I can't trust anybody because, I'm Mr. or Mrs. Truth, and I tell all this, but nobody's telling the truth to me, so I got to protect myself. You know how that is, right? Okay. So you're true to your word, but you're inconsistent. Uh-oh. You're true to your word, but you're late all the time. You said that you will be there on time, and so that means that you're not dependable either. That means you didn't even communicate to me that this is what you're going to do and what you're switching to, huh? You see how these fleshly habits spin off of each other? It didn't take much. It took one character flaw. It took one habit to actually counteract everything else that you said in this wheel. All right, so reaction. You know what? I have a fantastic mood. I'm up. I'm excitable. But sometimes I just go off on people. And I need to make sure everybody knows where I stand because, this is how I roll. But, I maintain my mood all the time. Is there something wrong with what just happened? Yes, there is. Yes, there is. So do people see you as dependable? Are people kind of edgy around you? Like, uh-oh, what is that person going to do? How are they reacting? Because you're off. You have a fleshly habit that's actually throwing everything off. Now people don't know how you're going to communicate based on the fact of your reaction. Do you see how this wheel is affecting your day-to-day life at work? Early in our conversation, we had talked about in the very first one, one of the two. Let's just put it to you like that. One of the two first, part one or part two. We had talked about you can tell how well you do based on your relationships that you have and that you don't have anymore. They tell you everything about how your personality is. Now, there's some of that stuff that's, obviously is true, but there's a lot of habits that people needed to just break away from you. That toxicity was too much for somebody possibly. And they created barriers around you to where they can not feel comfortable or effective around you. It's interesting, if your world is small around you and you haven't been healed, well, what's the end result? It's your fleshly habits that have this. It's one thing to be healed and operating on the other side of the fence and have that's different. But if you have a small network and everything's just kind of collapsed around you, maybe it's your fleshly habits that are showing up everywhere. Maybe it's this toxicity that's showing up and it's affecting your business growth. That's the next level thing that you want in your business, and you've been pushing hard, you've been working 12 hours a day and I can't go anywhere. Maybe there's something happening in this wheel as far as habitually that you cannot break from. That keeps on making you work 12 hours and being ineffective. So your habits, these are expectations both parties have of each other. There goes that word expectations again. One of our past shows, expectations will always show up in all of our shows because it shows up in every single day of your life. When you go and wash your face in the morning, you expect for that water to come on as long as you paid the bill. And even if you didn't pay the bill, there's part of you that expects for that water to come on still. That's just how we roll. But it's your habits that people are focusing on. It's showing up. And so these habits start to create expectations. Because again, in the previous show, when we're talking about how secure is your business, what's one of the most important values for people? To feel secure. So if I need to feel secure, I'm going to look at your habits all the time. Because I want to know what your next move is. You know how it is. If you've been hurt before, that's where that you want to have that response of, well, I want to make sure I know what you're going to do next. So you start looking at everything, how they move, how they talk, and how all that stuff comes about because you want to feel secure. But your habits of doing this right here, they're hindering my expectations. Your habits are hindering your expectations of your growth that you're seeking. They're hindering the relationships in your office space because your employees are part of your growth. But if they keep on responding to your bad habits, your fleshly habits, it's still keeping them, it's messing with their expectations that they have you, and if that hits, then that's the expectations that they have of the company because the company is you. You're the CEO. You cannot out-money people. Because people do this amazing thing with their heart. It's called feel. You can't outthink people because people at some point will feel. These habits are an everyday occurrence. When you talk about somebody's experience with something, you're talking about the everyday occurrence. You're talking about the habits that you had at that particular moment with that particular thing. So if I told you, if we're having a conversation and I wanted to potentially refer somebody as a business, I'm going to say, oh, absolutely, call Jim. I guarantee he'll call you back. You can text him right now. I guarantee he'll call you back within 10 minutes. You don't know Jim, but I just explained to you my experience and his habits. That's how habits are showing up in your conversation. That's how you start to describe things. Based on the habits of what you've experienced is what you'll say. It's an everyday occurrence. Let's roll back to this first 3 months here. Because you're trying to figure out, because the only way to heal from something is if you know the root of something. And if you as a business owner are struggling with your fleshly habits, let me show you what happened. This is what it's the craziest thing, but it's so accurate. Number one, you probably had conversations that you can't maintain. That's why I said open your heart in the very beginning, because could be a habit. It's very easy because life and death are in the power of the tongue. Those who eat of his fruit. Right? Well, so back to that Proverbs scripture, that's where this is coming from. Life and death are in the power of the tongue. So you probably had conversation that you can't maintain. The fact that you couldn't maintain that conversation means that you had a whole bunch of death that you spoken a long time ago. So death already entered in to that world. All right, let's go ahead and take number 2. You probably had made promises that you had no plans on maintaining. It's easy to make promises. Oh, you know how it is. On the weekend, somebody invites you, hey, come to my house on Saturday. This is pre-COVID conversation. Come to my house on Saturdays. Oh, yeah, I'll be there. Yeah, I will be there. Saturday comes, you had no intentions on being there. You spoke death into the future. It came into your relationships. You couldn't hold that promise, and it showed up on earth. You subdued a relationship based on your current ability. Now when that person asks you, they're going to be like, are you really coming? Why did they ask you that? Because you have a fleshly habit of making promises you weren't or planning on maintaining. Number 3, you probably introduced the best version of yourself, but haven't achieved it yourself. If you look in the Bible, this is where the Pharisee spirit comes up. Okay? It's very easy at the interview process or any relationship to offer the best part of yourself, and that's what you loved. But all of a sudden, now that you got comfortable in the relationship, let me go ahead and introduce my bad habits to you. I forgot to do that in the very beginning. I'm so sorry. Here's how my flesh works. I like to kick, whatever. But now this new person, like, who in the heck what version is this? Is this version negative 4.0? All these conversations and promises were made in the flesh. That's the toxicity. Because it was made in the flesh, you're going to get death results. What is my perception of your habits? How do I feel about you? What's going on through my mind now? This is what I start to consume. I consume your words, your actions, and most importantly, the fruit from both of those. Most importantly, your actions. I can conform to your fleshly habits. Did you know that? You can change my whole world based off of that. Very dangerous. Now, do you really think I'm doing bad, Maurice? I have $1 million in the bank. Doesn't matter. The Lord doesn't look at your bank account. He looks at how you treat his children. Consider that. The enemy will make you choose. You can deal with your toxicity, or you can maintain the money, or the enemy wants you to negotiate. Sit on that for a minute. I actually have to get back to work. Next week, we'll deal with the rest. Have a good day.